The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show was originally broadcast on May 11th, 2021.
Aloha and welcome, Maui, to Business Matters, Maui Chamber of Commerce's morning radio show every Tuesday, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines and Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. I am your host, Pamela Timpot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and today we're going to talk about the visitor industry and managing tourism, along with shifts in the vacation rental industry, and hear from a local manufacturer, Alohi Images Maui. So first, I have the great pleasure to welcome Hawaii Tourism Authority's, I'm going to say recent, not new, and we'll explain that in a minute, recent president and CEO, John DeFries. John was born and raised in Waikiki. He now lives in Kona on Hawaii Island. He was raised by family elders steeped in Hawaiian culture. He has more than 40 years of professional experience in the tourism and resort development industries. Aloha, John. I'm so glad to have you with us today.
Good morning. You make me sound old early in the morning, but thank you.
Young at heart. Young at heart. I don't know. I'm 29 again today, maybe. It is what you make it, I believe.
Absolutely.
But you do have so many years' experience in the visitor industry, and now you've been the head of HTA for a little less than a year. Can you give us a brief update on HTA?
Sure. I took the position back in mid-September of last year for a number of reasons, but one of them being that I thought that the economic crisis and the public health threat, which caused our industry to basically go into a stall, would produce an opportunity to rethink it in certain areas. What I always knew, though, when I stepped in, was that the recovery efforts would move way too slow for some and way too fast for others. And we find ourselves in such a predicament right now as Trans-Pacific travel going into the summer, especially out of the U.S., is expected to be extremely vigorous, even in the absence of the international markets.
Well, yeah. You know, I said, what a difference March makes, because we were doing an article talking about in February how businesses were still really devastated, and we were filming in Paia, and when we went down to film, it was just at the beginning of spring break, and things were already starting to pick up, and you know, owners were back, shops were reopened, and then it was like boom, here came March and that spring break period that we were so grateful for, to see such a wonderful recovery. And as you point out, we're, like you said, I think that was very well put, we're sort of at a time where it was slow for some, and it's now starting to feel a little fast for others.
You know, when you think back to pre-pandemic 2019, the visitors per day on Maui, the census was roughly about just under 68,000 per day, and generated visitor expenditures of $14.5 million per day. 6 months ago, when visitor arrivals were hovering, well, let's say 8-9 months ago, when visitor arrivals were hovering near zero, we ended up ending 2019 feeling concerned and exhilarated by the banner year that tourism had, concerned that it had produced a number of hotspots throughout the state that needed to be managed better. And so we go from New Year's Eve 2019, and 6 months later, when you're hovering around zero arrivals, those of us that are Kama'aina, have felt both extremes. Right. And I have to admit, I'm in Waikiki every week at HTA, and I have to admit that during the summer, being back on a beach that I grew up on as a kid that was empty was euphoric.
Right.
And there was an article on the baby hammerhead sharks being seen near shore, and I remember as a kid having to always untangle those baby hammerheads out of my nets, the fishing nets. And so, on the one hand, the environment came back with a fervor. The reduced human activity allowed all of those environments to regenerate and replenish themselves.
Right.
The flip side of that is that the economic crunch just exerted so much pain on small business, big business, individual families. And so when I took the position in September, people kept saying, "Boy, this is a tough job." And I kept saying, "You want to know what a tough job is? Try to be unemployed and raise a family."
Right.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Don't worry about me at HTA. So we're having to reopen, generate as many arrivals as we can of the right kind of visitor, which is not easy.
Right.
One that's more mindful, more respectful, one that will buy local.
Right.
And at the same time, we're experiencing this pent-up demand, selected discounts in travel packages. You got federal stimulus checks that are now out there. So there's going to be what I expect to be almost a spring breakish type of summer, at least in June, July, to deal with just this pent-up demand. And at the same time, our messaging to the markets, the U.S. right now, has to be very precise and has to hover around the kinds of cultural values that we as residents in Kama'aina not only adhere to, but are central to the fabric of our community. And so we find ourselves in a challenging balancing act, but that comes with the territory.
Well, that is a perfect segue into my next question. But for those who are just tuning in to Business Matters this morning, I am speaking with Hawaii Tourism Authority's President and CEO, John DeFries. So, John, there has been a lot of discussion circulating around how do we manage tourism, particularly during this pandemic. I've been to forums where you've spoken, and we've been talking about how to better do this pre-pandemic. I remember the forum on the Big Island back in October 2019. So can you talk to us this morning about some of the things that have been planned, some of the decisions that have been made, and ways that HTA is moving forward in some of these new directions these days to get the right tourism and tourists here, and how do we better manage tourism?
Sure. So you don't do it with campaigns, and you don't do it with the flavor of the month. You do it by putting a foundation in place, which I believe the HTA board did in January of 2020 when they adopted a strategic plan for 2020 through 2025. They got to January 2020 and that plan after canvassing the state in the preceding year, calendar year 2019. The reason I point to the strategic plan is it's built on 4 pillars: natural resources, Hawaiian culture, community and community well-being, and global branding. Right? Mm-hmm. So when we think about, back in the mid-'70s when I started in the industry, if somebody said, name the 4 pillars of the strategic plan in the mid-'70s, it would have sounded more like hotels, airline, rent-a-cars, and activities, and retail. Right, and so what I recognized in this strategic plan was that the HTA board was demonstrating a much more comprehensive view, a greater awareness of where the implications and impacts were beginning to erode and show up, and therefore the industry board responsibility. It's the beauty and serenity of our natural resources and the vibrancy upon which we send the global brand of Hawaii worldwide. It's the uniqueness and the special qualities of the Hawaiian culture and our language that we build a global brand as well. And then when you get into our community, the fabric's held together by values like aloha and malama, all of which are being tested at this time, right? But nonetheless, the industry put that, or HTA put that strategic plan in place, and then out of it grew one of its offspring, which is referred to as a Destination Marketing Action Plan. Now, I point those out. Those are accessible to our listeners on the HTA website. I would encourage you, if you haven't done so, to visit that. Now, there's foundational, there's a framework here, but again, in some areas, it's not moving fast enough. Mm-hmm. And I just read this morning an alarming article of incidents in Hana, and Hana, besides being near and special to all of us, is one of those places, end of the road, for the visitor that is going to experience this comeback in ways that are sensitive. It'll feel like the situation is almost unmanageable, and yet I know of people in Hana who are doing their best to try and bring that kind of consciousness and framework into place. And so I can only hope that communities will continue to dialogue with us at HTA, with the elected officials, and, collectively call our attention to places that need this kind of increased attention and immediate focus, because we're having to manage a comeback without having all the management systems in place.
Right. Yeah, and we've seen some different moves this year too, as we're coming back on funding, and challenges there. John, as we've seen so many industries suffer throughout COVID-19, the visitor industry, of course, hit the hardest across the board, and all of the feeder industries that benefit from the visitor industries have desperately struggled. Can you give us an update on how the industry is doing overall? I mean, we've had this low, we've had this rebound. How are we doing overall with the checks and balances of going through those lows and the rebound since spring? And what are some of the ongoing challenges and new challenges and new opportunities?
One program that gets easily marginalized and taken for granted because at some level it's a nuisance for the traveler. But I have to tell you that the Safe Travels program of pre-travel testing being made mandatory, certainly not foolproof, certainly not perfect, but it speaks for itself in terms of having filtered a significant amount of COVID coming into our state from the out-of-state traveler. And so I point to that because there are a number of people, notwithstanding Mayor Victorino himself and his team, who spend each week revisiting these programs to try and strike a balance between protecting public safety and allowing the economy, specifically tourism, to recover. And I have the privilege of being in those meetings with them twice a week. And I've been pretty amazed across the board at how well and how civil and constructive those meetings are, because you've also got the emergency management team in the Department of Health and HTA in those sessions. I want to point to that first, because I get calls from around the nation of people inquiring about how Hawaii was able to achieve that, and other destinations who wish to model that. That's one that's in place. The next thing we're doing, and you'll see more of it in about 2 to 3 weeks, is HDA has no product to sell, right? We don't sell concert tickets. We don't sell room nights, hotel rooms, right? We actually think of us as kind of like a tuning fork. We've got to like establish a tune, and then the right, key, and then the rest of the industry kind of comes in around it because it resonates to that vibration. So what we need to do is focus on how we message to America and to the world.
Right.
And when I arrived, it was important to me that the cultural value of Malama be established as a organizing principle. And much to my pleasant surprise, the Hawaii Visitors and Conventions Bureau had already gravitated toward Malama being central to the messaging. Basically, the message to the visitor is, well, we have a responsibility to Malama you, care for you.
Right.
We are also obligated to educate you on how you Malama us as a place and as a people, right? And so up until now, there's been very little marketing going on because the markets just weren't ready. But the U.S. in particular is now we're going to step up that messaging. It's going to have to be accompanied with mask wearing, social distancing, personal hygiene, all of that. And so we're about to roll those programs out. Now, the one thing I want to point out is, and this is a personal observation, this is not the same America.
Yes.
This is not the same American market that we knew 4 years ago. The nation's been highly politicized. The pandemic's been highly politicized. We're running into way too many anecdotal stories about people refusing to wear a mask because they don't wear a mask back home. And that's creating friction and outright conflict in areas that concern me, but we're going to have to put a concentrated effort to protect our communities and at the same time help revitalize the economy and the reopening of business, and again find a way to strike that balance. It's going to be challenging because the attitudes in the U.S. Are somewhat fragmented and polarized, which in my mind is why Hawaii is so important. Is because it is the antithesis of how we were raised and how we choose to conduct our way of life.
Yeah. We live in such a special place, and we have such a rich culture that we have the blessing of being able to tap into and share with others. As you mentioned, John, you talked about summer coming and rolling out these new messages. How can the community help? How can we get involved to be a part of this movement, to let people know, especially you mentioned some people saying they don't want to wear their mask or they don't wear it in their state. And of course, we're hearing new guidelines saying that if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. But we also know there's many people, even locally, who are choosing not to be vaccinated. So how do the retailers, the restaurants, the business community, how do we get involved and help with this messaging and sort of unite around the common themes? And I love that you said, visit our site. You can see the plans. We want to educate the community as well on how they can support this.
No, but the way to do it, and the mantra for me, and I would encourage others to adopt it or make it better. And the mantra for me is Malama Ku'uhome, which is caring for my beloved home. Let that particular principle and mantra guide your activities in your businesses, because you need to protect your space, you need to protect your people, And part of that protection is to protect their safety and health. And part of that protection is to help regrow your business, right? So I would make it very personal. There's nothing we can possibly export to you out of Honolulu that is going to be near or better than what each responsible business owner and resident of Maui can do. And, it comes down to politely approaching people and asking them to wear a mask. On occasion, I find myself in elevators in particular thanking people for wearing their mask.
Yes.
But it's going to come down to personal interactions, because these kinds of interactions take place at a very personal level. And while I might cite, verse from the strategic plan, there's a reason that plan's there, but that plan doesn't serve the moment. And those of us that find ourselves in these moments will have to rely on the set of values that we grew up with. The idea that protecting our beloved home, in this case Maui, and different communities within Maui, is, we need to experience it and express it on a very personal level. And that's been part of a Maui tradition for as long as I've certainly been in the industry.
Yes, that's very true. All right. Well, I love that, John. Malama Ku'uhome. John DeFries, thank you so much for being on our show today and a guest and providing us with such valuable insight on our visitor industry and plans for the future. We've enjoyed having you on. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Everybody take care.
Aloha. We'll have you back again soon.
Aloha. I would love to.
Thank you. Ahuiho.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
We're back. Let me now welcome owner and CEO of Coconut Condos, Angela Leone. Angela was named 2019 Small Business Person of the Year, and the company is proud to have been named to the Inc. 5000 list. Coconut Condos is also a proud member of the Professional Management Association. Aloha and good morning, Angela.
Aloha, good morning. So nice to speak with you today.
Nice to have you on the show. Please tell our audience, because you were instrumental in establishing the Professional Rental Management Association, known as PMRA. Tell the group a little bit about PRMA.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much. We are professional property management companies, and we're all licensed in the state of Hawaii. And we manage legal vacation rental properties, mostly condos. And all of our members are locally owned and operated companies, mostly located in West and South Maui.
And how many members do you currently have now?
We have 8 different companies representing a couple thousand condos up and down the coast of Maui, and hundreds of employees.
So for those tuning in, this is a new group. It's actually a trade council. Angela is a current member and has been a member of the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And we started talking, she was sharing with me as COVID was, in full swing and the industry was shut down. But, working with the chamber and others and the county, looking at how the condos could be more safe, how they could reopen more safely, how they could work with visitors to understand, who has gone through testing and make sure they're checking the appropriate QR codes, and sort of everything was in an upheaval, and the industry was uniting, which was really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, we formed as a trade council under the chamber, and we started meeting this summer regularly, pretty much weekly, trying to get set up and figure out all of the cleaning guidelines and reopening guidelines and how to check QR codes. And as all of that was unfolding, just really trying to work alongside the county to make sure that we were doing everything that we could do for a safe reopening. We established our COVID cleaning guidelines in line with our national organization called BRMA and BRHP, and have rolled that out to all of our members as kind of the best practice and guidelines for safe reopening, and just making sure that all of the visitors are following the rules, and we're not able to quarantine guests in our properties, and so making sure that information is disseminated to them and all the steps that they need to do prior to arrival.
And I know there was a lot of instructions coming through because as the rules kept changing, like everybody, but particularly, and you're in the hotel industry as well, you folks were constantly having to educate and re-educate, sometimes every few days. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that's why in the beginning it was so important for us to come together as a group, and I'm so thankful that PRMA formed. I know all of the members are, because we were going through this together and updating one another and rolling out new instructions to guests and making sure that we were, following along with what we were supposed to do to reopen safely. So we were just really thankful to, have this group formed and walk through it together. It's, obviously it's been a lot, and the visitor industry has been really impacted, and, we're coming back with with a lot of, I say it's like a fire hose turned on, and a bit of whiplash reopening. But yeah, we've definitely been thankful to have this group formed to go through all of that together.
I love that, because so many times people look at everybody as competitors. And COVID, in some ways, really brought us all together. And they always say, through crisis comes invention and innovation, and so this is this was one of those areas where everybody banded together and looked to really make a positive difference and learn from each other's best practices, which was really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
For those tuning in, I'm Pamela Timpot with the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and I'm speaking with Angela Leone, owner and CEO of Coconut Condos. And so, Angela, with all of these shifts, what was talk to us about the huge impact on short-term rentals, what you experienced, initially, and then, like you said, it's a very different time right now with the whiplash that you're experiencing. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about that. How did that feel? What was happening within the properties as a result of having no business and then slowly starting to rebuild to this now kind of urgent situation where, we've got a lot of people coming in?
Yeah, definitely. Well, probably really similar to what the hotel industry experienced. We were fully shut down in March of last year, and a lot of that time was spent, refunding guests and dealing with cancellations, and kind of the first time ever going through something like this, as all of us had never experienced a pandemic before. So closed down, kind of really as a small business owner, figuring out what do I need to do to with staff and layoffs. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, honestly, as a small business owner. And I know a lot of fellow business owners on this island, probably was one of the hardest things they walked through. So
absolutely,
definitely. So March through the summer, we were fully closed down, and then Kama'aina Travel reopened in July. But we don't really see much. We didn't see much business coming through Kama'aina Travel. So we still kept on checking on our units, doing maintenance assessments, making sure there were no leaks or anyone breaking in, just making sure that all the properties were safe and maintained. But that's pretty much the extent of what we were doing again, and then rescheduling people and keeping people posted on what was happening in Hawaii, figuring out all of our protocols for when we did reopen. And then in October, we technically reopened, but there wasn't a lot of business happening, through really up until March of this year of 2021. So what we did see from October to March was longer stays, so less people coming, but the average for our company, for Coconut Condos, our average length of stay went from 6.5 nights to 14 nights.
Oh.
So there were a lot more people coming, doing remote work. Their kids were doing Zoom school. Rates were reduced, but we were it was like a soft reopening for many months.
Right.
And then in mid-March, I think it coincided with the vaccine rolling out and people becoming more comfortable traveling. That's when we really began to see reservations pick up. And since then, it's kind of been this fire hose turned on, and which is similar to what happened on the mainland. And I'm part of some advisory board groups with property management companies on the mainland, and they experienced that same thing just a lot earlier, in the summer when they were reopened. So it's similar to what's happened on the mainland, but ours just has come later. And so now, we're at higher occupancies, and everyone's just kind of hustling, like many small businesses on island, to get staff back and kind of reestablish all of our procedures and continuing with the COVID guidelines and checking QR codes. So it does add another layer of logistics.
Yeah, and you mentioned, how has it been getting staff back? Because that's a big issue right now.
Yeah, so we just had our PRMA meeting, our monthly meeting last week, and every member that was on the call raised their hand, essentially saying that they were looking for staff. And I mean, I don't think that's unique to our industry. I think that's island-wide and, countrywide, struggling to get people back to work. And one thing that we're going to do as an industry is host a virtual job fair and try to, recruit local work and provide, more information about what jobs are available if people want to get involved in this industry.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear that you guys are working on that, and we're, of course, happy to help. And because, as you pointed out, there's so many unique things about your industry that maybe people don't know, and you want to share it with them and tell them about how great these jobs are and the kind of careers they can have.
Definitely. Yeah, and, I think that getting up and running, we've seen some of these trickle-down effects, like through our linen companies and the restaurants having trouble getting people back to work, and it's kind of affected everyone. So I look forward to, getting back to the point where companies aren't, struggling so much in that area. So if we can be of help, we're excited about that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And you're right. Across the board, too, we've heard stories of, all of the partners, too, that everybody's system is individually struggling. And then because we're individually struggling, as we look to come back, we've had supply chain issues or partner, challenges, and we're all in the same boat. So everybody's working together, trying to find creative ways and just kind of get everything done and keep everything moving forward, which is exciting. You start talking about some of the challenges that you're still facing with getting the employees back and dealing with the fact that you've got such a high level of visitors in now. It's rebounded, and so you're trying to balance that. But I also know some of the rates have been coming back up. What do you see as the opportunities ahead?
Yeah, definitely. For the last 10 or 11 years that we've been in operation, we've been able to track our data and our average daily rates and occupancy rates, and they've been pretty stable and predictable. But with COVID, the COVID effect, those have kind of all gone out the window. Q1, just January through March, is usually everyone's busiest quarter, and that really wasn't true this year. So it's looking like now Q2 might be replacing that. And from our experience and from other PRMA members, and what I'm hearing from the hotel industry as well, is that demand, now that fire hose is turned on, there's demand to come back to Maui. And the benefit of that is that you can raise rates because, the supply and demand. So generally in May and June, our rates aren't as high as we're able to charge now. So that's definitely been, it's been a positive to help make up for the loss over the last year. And I don't really foresee that slowing down. It will just be kind of time will tell. I'm afraid to make any predictions about anything anymore because
I hear you.
The last 12 months. So I just kind of say, who knows? We're going to make our best guess and move forward in that. But I think definitely the prices have gone up. That's good. Hoping to create more jobs. I think one thing that maybe small businesses, including myself, have learned in this process of having to kind of scale back and basically shut down, you're rebuilding everything, and you kind of have a chance to maybe rebuild it a little better or a little more efficiently,
right,
or a little leaner, or whatever you need to do as a small business now is kind of an opportunity to rebuild it back better. So I guess just trying to keep a positive outlook and keep going and be thankful that we survived. And in terms of tourism, trying to do that better as well. My husband and I had the opportunity to be part of the Malama Hawaii campaign that's going to be launching soon, promoting sustainable tourism and just that visitor that wants to come and give back to Hawaii. Right. That is a really exciting campaign, and I think that I hope that we can continue to encourage that movement and that focus on this new traveler.
I don't know if you had a chance to hear John DeFries. We were just talking about that, so I'm glad that you mentioned it, and I'm really excited as well by the new things that we're seeing. I had a chance to also participate in what they refer to as the DMAP program, the Destination Management program that is being rolled out, and really, again, all around being, all around the concept and pillar of Malama. And being more sustainable, helping people understand our culture, teaching them ways that they can be more respectful of the culture and the environment. I'm really excited by that, and I think that presents many opportunities, for properties and businesses, and all of our industries to unite around that, and at every level, whether you're a small, whether you're an accountant or you're a small mom and pop restaurant, or you're a condo or a hotel, or where throughout the county, if we unite around these concepts, I think it will have a tremendous impact on what they're trying to do, which is bring in the right type of visitor.
Yeah.
And so, now, are you folks challenged with the car rental situation the same way that we're hearing everybody's challenged in the visitor industry with the car rentals?
So, that's part of that whole whiplash experience, right? So we are excited that occupancy has reopened in restaurants to 50%. I know that a lot of our guests, after, jumping through all the hoops to get here, which we're glad that they're arriving here with negative tests and safely traveling. We've been hearing from people that it's very difficult to get reservations for dinner. They're booked out 3 and 4 weeks, and then the rental car situation, certainly. We get guests calling all the time, like, do you have any local tips? Do you have any insight on this? And we're like, not really, but you thankfully have put us in touch with some local chamber members to provide some shuttle options, and just trying to, work with other partners to address the situation in the meantime. And then we're just letting our guests know as soon as they book their flight and accommodations to start booking their dinner reservations and activities and sail cruises ahead of time as much as they can.
Yeah, I know a lot of local families too. We're saying, it's so hard to get a Mother's Day reservation, and we're seeing families here too struggling to buy cars themselves because things are going off the shelf. I recently met with a man who is one of our service providers with a software company that we work with, and he came and stayed for a month and a half, and he bought a car immediately and just bought a car and has been using it, and has, by doing that, saved a ton. But we've got a lot of people out there looking for affordable cars, just to get back and forth now as they're going back to work, and it's a challenge, and we know it's a challenge with auto manufacturing with the chips and not having that.
Yeah, and again, I don't think that problem is isolated to Hawaii. I think they're experiencing that on the mainland as well, just nationwide. So we're unfortunately experiencing these same struggles here, and maybe to a higher degree, just with our difficulty accessing supplies. But yeah, hopefully that. I'm not an expert on the rental car situation, but I'm hoping that that improves here in the near future.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for joining us today. We've loved learning more about the Professional Rental Management Association, known as PRMA, and you can visit mauichamber.com/prma.html to learn more about the organization. It's growing.
Yep. Thank you so much, Pam. Appreciate you having me on, and look forward to talking to you again.
Oh, we'll have you on again soon. Thank you so much.
Right.
We loved having you too. Aloha. I just want to share with everyone, this show is sponsored by Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. Sherry is a renowned watercolorist who offers an array of bright and beautiful art and gifts for every occasion. Hopefully you found her for Mother's Day, but if not, she has things that you can purchase year-round. Visit her gallery in historic Makawao Town or find her online. We are now going to feature one of our long-standing Made in Maui County Festival participants. I'm pleased to welcome from Waikapu, Maui, Shelley Pellegrino. She is the owner of Alohi, not Aloha, Alohi Images Maui. Aloha, Shelley, and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Good.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
So, we love your bright and vibrant pictures. So tell us about your inspiration to create your company around photography, and how did you get started in this?
Thanks. Well, I grew up in Waikapu, and I have just always loved photography since I was a child. I've always had a camera in hand. I have a camera in hand, wherever I go. And, about 15 years ago, I started taking some photos of the plants and flowers on our family's farm, on a farm in Waikapu, and really started to enjoy a kind of a different aspect of photography, not just taking pictures of my family, and started looking at the kalo and the loa'e and all of the various plants around the farm. And one year I decided to make some note cards and give them away as presents. And with my photography, and at that point, my mom, when she received them, she said, maybe you should start doing something with your photography. It's been long enough. And I kind of looked at her and I said, well, do you think people really want to buy cards? Do people write things anymore? And she says, well, give it a try. And kind of that's how Alohi Images got started. And it's been 10 years, and it's still doing really well.
Your cards are stunning, absolutely stunning. And I kept thinking, I wonder how much time that you spend, and of course with your experience, maybe you don't spend as much time, but when I look at the angles of the images and the detail on the images and how up close that you get, how much time do you spend on the photography side of making the cards, and how much time is put into the manufacturing of cards, and do you handle this all yourself, or is there help?
Oh, well, it's definitely a labor of love. That's for sure. The photography itself, I rarely decide, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go take a picture of X today. Usually it's kind of organic in a way, and but I could, for example, the ohia tree at the farm. I could spend, an hour kind of just staring at the buds and the blooms and trying to find the right angle. And sometimes it's just hit or miss, and sometimes I see it and I go, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
The photographs, some of the photographs I've taken on Cub Scout hikes with my sons. Sometimes one occasion, my brother called me from the farm and said, we have a taro plant and it's blooming. I mean, that's the only time I've ever seen a kalo flower.
I was going to say.
I just ran up there and got the photo. So it really is kind of an organic process, if you ask me.
Wow. And and I love that, one, how cool is it that people are calling you and saying, hey, come up and see this, because you are getting things that people don't get to see. And I think that's why people really love, your photography and the cards that you've created with them. And clearly you have a real artistic eye. It's one of those things that, it's hard to capture the right light, the right angle, and you've definitely got a real eye for that. And so once you've got the photography, how are the cards actually made? Are you making them on island yourself or working with local printers?
Yeah. Well, what I do is I usually will, take those images. And so I've got, essentially two different kinds of cards. So I've got some cards, a note card size, that are just the images themselves. Uh-huh. So, they don't have any text on them or anything. But then I also do greeting cards. And so those are usually in small and larger sizes, but they could be for birthdays, for anniversaries, thank you cards, Christmas cards, sympathy cards. And those, in a way, take a little bit longer because I'll look at an image and I'll try to figure out, is there something that, is there a way to kind of make a connection to that particular photo with, or, a sentiment. So I spent a lot of time looking through the Olelo Noeau book. I'm usually looking for just the right Hawaiian proverb to, match an image that I have. And that's really what takes quite a bit of time, and then putting it together. Because really I'm more of a photographer than a designer, but I've kind of had to become a sort of a designer in a way as well in making the greeting cards. And then the other aspect of it is trying, I grew up in a family of teachers. So, and my brother is close to the land, right? That's his background. So it's not just about the photograph, but it's about telling the story, giving some information on the photograph. So, I usually will have, the Hawaiian name. If the plant has a Hawaiian name, I will have that along with the English name. I like, it has information about it, so what the plant is endemic to Hawaii, whether it's Polynesian introduced, whether it's non-native, and then also where the photograph was taken. And so all of that information I put on the back of the card, and including any Hawaiian translations as well. And once I've got all that put together, I've had a great relationship with Maui Printing Company all of these years, and they do a fabulous job, putting those, printing the cards and putting them together for me and making sure it looks just right. And then it's back to me for everything else, packaging, marketing, all of that work. Of course, I've got a ton of help from my family, and so I couldn't do it without them. But it's definitely a family endeavor.
And tell people, if just in case they don't know, who your parents are, because they're widely known in our community.
Yep. My dad is Victor Pellegrino, and he was a college professor at what used to be Maui Community College many years ago for 30 years. And then my mom is Wallet Pellegrino. And, our family goes way back, to, through the generations, all the way back, through our, Hawaiian side of the family, through our missionary side of the family, the Bailey House, Ho'ike. And so, we have a strong connection to the community. And, of course, my brother is the caretaker of Noho'ana Farm in Waikapu.
That is awesome. Well, you have a family steeped in culture as well as John DeFries, who we had on earlier this morning. And, I love that it shows. And I love how, your cards are centered around the culture. And I love that, and I can imagine that really only somebody who comes with a lot of that background like you, when you look at these beautiful flowers or scenes, you're trying to make the connection by connecting with different proverbs. And I think coming from that culture, who better than you to make these connections and help, really see things in the right light to convey those messages. So, Shelley, where can people find these stunning cards? I think that besides my website, the largest selection of cards you'll be able to find at Native Intelligence in Wailuku. In fact, Kapono Aimole Tau, who was the owner of Native Intelligence, he was the one that actually worked with me to develop the name Alohi Images. Oh, nice.
And they've been close friends of mine for a long time, and their son and my son were classmates for many, many years. So Native Intelligence has a great selection, collections in Makawao. You can also find them at Mana Foods and Hui no Eao. And more recently, they've just been added to the Lahaina Visitor Center at the Old Lahaina Courthouse.
Oh, fantastic.
So, And I have to give a shout-out to Hallmark also. I'm so sad that Hallmark is leaving the island, but they have really worked hard to include local artists in their store.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm sad to see my little Hallmark section go.
Aww.
But they're still available. They'll still be available on the neighbor island.
Well, give everybody your website address, Shelley.
It is www.alohi, with an I, alohiimages.com. And, of course, I have to give a shout-out to the Maui County Festival for
Thank you.
being an amazing sponsor. And I'll also be on Pop-Up Makeke for Season 3 as well. So lots going on right now.
Good. Well, we're glad to hear it. Well, Shelley, we have loved having you on the show. Thank you so much. It goes fast. I always want to learn more. But thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And, I'm just happy to still be in business.
Oh, we're glad that you are. Thank you. Take care.
You.
Aloha. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. It always goes so quick. Thank you for joining into Business Matters today, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines and Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. I'm Pamela Tumbot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, wishing you blessings and best wishes for a beautiful Maui day.